In this video, we're going to be taking a look at how we can model some basic primitives inside of Maya, and then we can push this to Arnold, and then we can render out and learn how to get a really high quality render inside of Maya using Arnold. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing that we're going to do is set up our models inside of Maya, and you're going to learn how to make each one of these shapes that you see here, and then we're also going to make this infinity wall that you see here in the back. So I'm just going to go to my perspective camera so we can kind of zoom out a little bit and you can see what this setup will look like. After we're done with the models, then we'll go ahead and start working on pushing those to Arnold and rendering everything. Okay, so we're going to get going and we're going to model this box shape first. So before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and just make a brand new scene, and we're going to start from scratch, and we're going to take a look at the grid and setting up our grid. Okay, here we are inside of Maya with a brand new scene, and we're going to talk a little bit about how to get your grid set up, and if you want to do anything to change the background colors and things like that, we can do that as well. What I like to do whenever I open up a brand new scene, if you take a look at some of these icons along through here, as time goes on, you'll learn a little bit more about this. We are in the modeling subset through here, so make sure you've got that. And if you see this shelf, they've got a bunch of different shelves with different tools. We're going to probably just stick with this poly modeling thing right here. But this little icon turns on multi-sample anti-aliasing, so it makes the wireframes in your grid and things like that draw a little bit cleaner. So I really like to turn that on at the very beginning. If you want to go to Render, Viewport 2.0 and go to the option box, there's a lot of different options for how this renders in real time within through here. We can go to the anti-aliasing. I'll turn on smooth wires and up the sample count. So if you're getting some slowdown on there, you might want to check that. The other thing I like to do is turn on this screen space ambient occlusion. And also within Viewport 2.0 and the options, there's some settings for the screen space ambient occlusion as well. So I don't have it at the highest, but I think this looks pretty good within through here. Now if you start to get slowed down a little bit later when you get a lot of models on your screen and stuff like that, this definitely can slow things down, so it's really easy just to go and turn that back off. Okay, with that being said, the next thing I'll talk to you about is the grid. So if we go to display and grid and go to the option box for this, anything you see in the interface that has this little cube here, that means there's going to be options for those settings. You can also tear off this panel and have it floating if you want. You can close it back up. But this is how we're going to get to the grid right here like this with the option box. So if you know a little bit about the grid, you can see here's the settings that I use. And I like these colors and I like this setup. This is set up to work pretty well for a gridded system using Unreal. And if I go and show you this, I'm going to go to the content browser, and I should have under my favorites some prototyping tools that I've developed. A little bit later on in the series, I'll show you how to get into UE4 and get a hold of the UE4 mannequin within there. But for now, I'm just going to show you what this looks like. I also have their FBX version, but then I also made my own my ASCII file version. So I'm just going to click and drag this in here just to show you what it's going to look like scale-wise with the UE4 mannequin. And here with these settings that I have. Now, he's set to be a little over 6 feet or 2 meters. Okay, so Maya is in centimeters, and so whenever you want to push over into UE4, like let's say we knew that this character is going to be roughly 2 meters. If we go and say create polygon primitives and we do a cube, and that's going to be the first thing that we're making, we're going to do the option box for this. You can see I've got this set to 100 by 100 by 100 and with divisions 1 and 1 and 1, and the axis is Y. I'm just going to go ahead and hit apply for that. And so you can see here's a 1 meter cube. And if I move this up and translate it over here in the channel box, so right here in the channel box, and I'll push this up 50, you can see here is 1 meter for us like this. Now if I duplicate this cube, I hit Control D and then I'll tap W for the move tool, and then I can move this up right here like this. And if I put this up to 150 like this, if I tap 4, you can see here's 2 meters, and he's not quite 2 meters tall like that. So I just loaded up a web browser real quick, and sometimes this is kind of handy. So I just typed in centimeters to feet. So if we were looking at 6 feet, that should be about 182 centimeters, like that. So knowing that number, we can actually go back through with our cubes that we see here, and we can set this to 182, like that. And then now we can just move this up and push it down to where it sits on the floor right there. So that would be 91. If we wanted to go half of the size of this would be just us taking this and moving up 91 units, because this is half of 182. So you can see the head of this character is just barely sticking out of the top of this. So they've made their default human character roughly 6 feet tall. So it's not quite 2 meters. But again, if we did this, if we changed the cube to 200, and let's just do the width and the height of 100, and sorry, I'll do the height 200 and the depth 100 and the width 100. So that's kind of cool with the beginning options for this, that you can change this any point that you want. And then I'll translate this up 100 like that, and you can see 6 feet, not quite 2 meters, but it's kind of close in that vicinity. So just again to give you some kind of reference of what's going on scale wise. So now that we know the scale that we're kind of working at, let's take a look back at the grid settings. So we're going to go to display, grid option box. And so if we do this length and width 400 units, that's just if you're in the perspective view like this, and we can tap spacebar to see other views for this. So let's click the quad view, and I'll tap 4, 4, 4 like this and zoom out a little bit. So there's the top, here's the front, here's the side, and here's our perspective view. So when we're in these orthographic views, the grid's going to continue on for infinity. So this is only relevant whenever you're looking in the perspective view. So you can tap spacebar to go in and out, and I can hover my cursor over this view, tap spacebar again. So that's how you can move in and out of these views pretty quickly and pretty easily. And it should be in this quad view one right here. So if that's not happening for you, just go ahead and click on that. You can see that. So this is going to give you 400 units out, and then I'm going to do this grid lines every 100 units. So you can see it's going to push out every 100 units. It's going to have a grid line. And then we got subdivisions set to 10. So I've got these markers here, and if we snap to the grid, it's real easy for us to snap to these increments. And since we're using meters and centimeters, it would just make sense to make it an even number like 10. So to get all these to show up, you also need the axis. I've got this thicker line for the axis turned on here, so you can see that highlights that nice and good. And then we've got the grid lines, and that's this one here, and then the subdivision lines is this one here. And these are the colors that I chose for this. So you can use the slider, you can drag the slider left and right for each one of these. So if you wanted a different color combination than what I have on here, you're free to go ahead and change those. And then when you're done, you can hit apply and close. So I'm just going to close this up here. So that's how I set up the grid, and these options work rather well for me. The other thing I was going to show you, if you hit Alt-B, you can cycle through colors for your background like this. Okay. That's pretty nice, and sometimes you need that to see better contrast in your models and things like that. So that's kind of handy. I'm going to get back to the view that we have here. That's a gradient. Now I did make one little tiny change on here, and I changed the color of this. Yours probably looks like a bluish color. So if we go to Windows and we go to Settings and Preferences, and then we go to Color Settings and open that up, you can see that there's a 3D view. And this is what I changed here, this gradient top and bottom. So I just made this a gray color. So if I click on this, you can see here's the actual values that I have for mine. And the gradient bottom, not quite black. So you can see it's a value of 0.026 right in through there. And then this background color is just set to 0.631, something like that. So again, you don't have to do this, but if you wanted the exact same color and same exact setup that I have, that's the options that I'm using for that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this UE4 mannequin. We're going to take our cube and then we're going to make this 100 by 100. So if you want to change multiple values in the channel box, if you don't see it over here, you might have something like this is tool settings. This thing here is the attribute editor, and I'm not a big fan of it having docked over here like that. I like to take this and click and drag it out like this, so you can do this with a lot of the different menus if you want. To open that up anytime, you can hit Control A to bring up the attribute editor like that. So that's how I kind of like this. So I'm going to go ahead and close that up. I believe that this is the human IK setting, and then this is the modeling toolkit. So as we're modeling and doing poly modeling, this will probably be a pretty handy thing to have. So just remember the modeling toolkit and then the channel box are probably going to be the big ones that you're probably going to care about. So here we are in the channel box. I'm going to go ahead and select this, and then I'm going to go, and if I select this here and hold down Shift and select here, I can do multiple fields at one time. So I'm just going to type 100 by 100, and then I'm going to translate this up 50 to get it to sit directly on the floor like that. And then the next thing that I'm going to do is we could keep the pivot point right in the middle like this. I'm going to tell you a little bit about you can move pivot points. So if you tap D, you can put Maya in a mode where now you're moving and manipulating the pivot point. And if you hold down V, you can turn on vert snap temporarily. So I'm just holding down V, and if I click and I drag here in the corner, you can see I can snap it to that vert here. If I hold down V and click and drag, I can snap it to this corner here. You could just move one axis at a time if you wanted, like that. The other thing that we can do is if I rotate down towards the bottom, I can temporarily turn on grid snapping by holding down X. So if I do that, I can snap to the grid. So I've just moved the pivot point like that, and I tap D, and then now our model has its pivot point set right here. So again, you can tap D to put it in this mode of moving the pivot around, and you can move it using these manipulators like this. If you hold down V, you can turn on vert snapping, and I can snap to these different verts. If I hold down X, I can snap directly to the grid like that, and tap D to go out of that mode. Alright, the last thing I'm going to do with this cube is I'm going to go to modify, and I'm going to say freeze transformations. We'll do the option box for this so you can just see what these are. You could turn off, and let's just say I wanted to just freeze the scale. I could do that, or if I just wanted to freeze rotation. So I think you get the idea for that. I'm just going to leave them all on, and I'm going to hit apply like this, and then that's going to freeze the transformations, and you can see now that that zeroes everything out. Why that is handy is if we move this cube somewhere pretty far away, even if you can't see it and you select it over here in the outliner, we could go and just go to these fields and then zero this stuff out, and you can see that we zeroed it out like that. So if I put it on rotate, if we do Q, that's picker, W is move, E, rotate, and R is scale. So we've got these different tools over here. So again, if I rotate this thing, and if I move it over this direction like this, and I want to get this thing back to its original position, all I have to do is select this field, hold down Shift, and then type in 0, and then now everything's zeroed out on that. Okay. The other thing that I like to do, if we want to keep this thing live and we want to change the options on this, this is live with the width and the depth and the height and the divisions. So I can select this and I can middle mouse drag left and right, and you can see how we can do that interactively. So let's try this with, again, I can select the name and then middle mouse drag left and right in the viewport like that to change that. But if I want to flatten the model and just have it be a model with nothing on it, we're going to delete the history. This is considered history, and you should get used to deleting history within inside of Maya, because that can cause problems a little bit later on. So I'll go to Edit, Delete by Type, and then we'll do History. And take a look at the hotkey for that because you'll use it a lot. Alt-Shift-D. So we've deleted the history for this, And if you want, you can rename the object, so we're in the outliner. If you don't see that by any chance, you can go to Windows, and then outliner sits here, and it can be docked within the program, just like this here. If you want to drag it out, you can always drag it out, whatever you want to do. I usually like to have it kind of floating so I can change the size of the window and position it in different places. And so what I'll do is I'll double click on this to change the name, and I'll do an underscore. I could do 01 like that. Now if I duplicate this object, I can hit Control D, and you can see it's going to duplicate it and then do the numbering correctly for me on that. Okay, I'm just going to take this model here, hold down Shift and select up to here, and hit delete, and delete those out. The next thing I'd like to talk to you about is the different modes for modeling. So right now we're in object mode, and you can see we've got maybe a set of options up here. This is the object type, and if we hit F9, then we can switch on over to component mode. So component mode is going to have your vertices, you have edges like you see here, or faces. So if we hit F9, we can select vertices. If we hit F10, these are the edges, and if we hit F11, these are faces. So F9, if you just move one vert all by itself, you can do that, and we can move this thing around, and you can change the shape of this thing. If you do an edge, you can move the whole edge at one time, and if you rotate it, it's like taking two verts and manipulating these two verts all at the same time, like this. And if we hit F11 for a face, it's like moving four vertices or all these edges all at the same time. So we can rotate this thing this way, we can scale it in, so we can really manipulate the shape pretty easily using those different methods. And again, if you want to toggle out of the component mode into object, hit F8, and then you're back in the object mode, and at that point we're scaling and we're rotating and we're translating the whole entire object. So that's the difference between object and component mode. What I'm going to have us do is go select our edges. So if you remember, F9 is verts, F10 is edges, and F11 is faces. So if we hit F10 and we select all the edges within through here, we can get to the bevel tool. So we can hold down Shift and right click, and then that's going to give us some different options for this. This is how I like to get to the bevel tool. You can see we can just kind of hold down Shift, right click, we get this marking menu, and we can drag out to the bevel edge, or we can do the bevel edge option box like that to build this thing up here. So that's one way to get to the bevel tool. The other way is if you want to go through the menu, you can go to Edit Mesh, and there's a lot of different options within here, but bevel is one of these in here, and we can go to the option box. So we've got two different ways to get to this thing. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to hit apply, and you can see that it's going to give us these options. I'm going to hit undo real quick because I've got some special sauce on here. So I'm going to go to edit, reset settings, and let's just go ahead and hit apply for this. So you might see something like that whenever you have this. And so I'm just going to go to this poly bevel right here like this, and I have this this is kind of hiding this little option, this box down here. So this is kind of cool. With this fraction, we can pull this up, and you can see what I did. I couldn't find it, so I just went over to the channel box, and you can see this new input after we ran this. We've got this poly bevel, so we can get to the options over here, or we can get to it through this little floating window that you see here. So we've got this fraction. We can click on the name fraction, drag left and right, and that'll do pretty big increment changes. If we hold on Control while we do it, we can get this finer level increment on here. And so this fraction, if I do 0.05, we can do specific values and say, hey, we're gonna hold these values every single time. Or let's do like 0.1. That's a pretty nice bevel on there. That's pretty big. I think it's a little bit too big for my taste, so we could do 0.075 like this. Now with the segments, you could click and drag on that, and you can see we can go up or down with that. Something interesting about this, if we do the segments, and if we do 2, you can see how we get an even split going down through here. So we still retain these face this face here, this face here, this face here if we wanted to split the model apart. Now if we go and do 3, we don't have an even split going down here. If we go to 4, that's the next one up that gives us rounding on here, and it keeps everything nice and even. So we can double click on like this, and I'm going to hold down Shift, and you can see how I could select those edges in through there like that. I'm going to close this poly bevel thing here, just select on it, and then select this to get the options back for this. If we do this chamfer and turn that off, we can do something like this here. So it doesn't change the shape of the model. Now we could take these segments down to 1, and you can see that we've added extra geo on here. So I'm going to show you, if we tap 3 for the smooth mesh preview on this, this is getting a little ahead of ourselves, but this is just something why I'd want to use this chamfer option and have it off like this. We're going to talk about topology and fencing and holding our edges, but this is a nice way that we could do that. So I'm going to turn this back to where chamfer is off, and then I'll do segments and I'll do 4. So we've got a nice cube just like this, and if we hit F8, that goes out of that component mode, goes into object mode. And again, if we want to delete history, we can do Alt-Shift-D to delete the history, or we can go to Edit and delete by type and do history there. So I'm just going to hit Alt-Shift-D and delete the history, and that is our first cube. That's our first primitive that we're going to make here. I'm going to show you this in the outliner as well. If we hit Control-G, or we go to Edit and we go to Group, we can start to group these things, and I can make this whole group, and I can call it first, I can call it Geo, like this. I like to make a geometry folder, and I'll open this up. If I select the cube again, if I hit Control-G, it's going to make a new group, and it's under the Geo folder, so we're starting to build up a little bit of a hierarchy here. And then I can just double click in here and then call this primitives, like that. And so then I'll start to use this folder as the place that I'll store my primitives. Next thing, since we've done quite a bit, let's go ahead and save our file. So if you want to go and save file, save scene as, and you can do that. Mine probably looks a little bit different from yours because I changed the options in here. Maya was having some trouble with its default viewer within through here, and so I changed it to Windows default viewer. What I could say about that is if we go to Windows, Setting Preferences, and go to Preferences right here, and then we go to File Projects, you can see that if we scroll down, we've got this file dialog, and then we can go to OS native instead of this Maya default. I wish this was working good for me because there's a lot of really cool options for this. You might not have any kind of issue with this, but if you do, have it to where it takes a long time to load up and be able to save your files, you'll want to go to your preferences and change that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close that out. I just wanted to point that out. That's why I'm going to have this difference for mine here. So if I save the file, I would go ahead and save it. And I'll go ahead and say File Save Scene As, do the option box, and do a Maya binary, save scene as, and then navigate to where this sits. And so this is the folder I want to save this in. I would suggest that you make a Maya folder for this. So I'm just going to right click and say new folder, and then just say Maya like this. And then I'm going to call this 01, and I'm going to call this basic shapes and Maya, and do underscore 001. I like to do a numbering system at the end, so that way if I've got multiple versions of this, it's really easy for me to change this number at the very end. So I'll just go ahead and save. And then that's our first part of this whole thing, and we'll get moving and create some of the other primitives. Before we move on and produce our next primitive, I wanted to show you assigning a material to this object can help us to identify the shading properties and just see if there's any kind of problems with things. It just makes it look a bit better for modeling, because this is a Lambert material. It doesn't have a whole lot of specularity on it. So what I like to do is if we select this object, we can right click and we can go to assign new material or existing material. Since we don't have anything, let's go ahead and say assign new material, and then we'll go into the Maya area and just click on blend. And then we can call this, I'm going to call this M underscore blend, like that. And that's all we got to do to create that material and assign it. And now you can see as we roll around the object, we can see its shape a little bit better, and we've got a nice specular highlight at times too. So the next primitive we're going to do, let's go ahead and hide this object. So we can select this and we can go under display and we can hide or show. And then take a look, you can see the hotkeys for this. If we hide something, it's Control H, and if we show something, it's Shift H. So I'll select it, Control H, and that'll hide this for me. And then now we're going to go and say create polygon primitives and do a cube again with the option box. We're going to do 100 by 100 by 100. Let's go ahead and hit create. We'll tap W for this, hold down X, and if we hold down X, we can click and drag up. And then we can move it up like this. So that's another way, or we can do it in the channel box, however you want to do it. If you remember the pivot point, we can tap D, we can hold down X, and we can snap that right here. So we'll tap D for that. And then if you remember, we said modify freeze transformations, and then we deleted the history, which is Alt-Shift-D, or you can go under Edit and delete by type history. So I'm going to move a little bit faster through each one of those steps because we're going to keep doing those over and over, and I think it's going to be good practice for you. So what I'm going to show you is this. We could take the face, we can hit F11 for this, or you can right click on here and say face, vert, edge, whatever you want to do. It's your choice. I'll hit face, I'll select it, and if we tap R, that'll put it on the scale tool. We could move this all the way in like this to make the pyramid shape. Now the problem is if we tap 3 for the smooth mesh preview, it's going to give you kind of an idea what's going on here. This is just a temporary preview to add subdivision levels to it. We still have that face in there like that. So what we could do is we could hit F9 and select our vertices, and we can shift right click over this and we can say merge vertices, and we say merge vertices to center, and that would merge those together. So now if I tap 3, you can see that's merged together. There's still a face right here for this. Okay, I'm going to tap 1 for that. And then I'm going to select these verts back here in the back, and we can do the same thing that we did before, and we can merge, shift, right click, merge vertices to center. And then now that should join those together if I tap 3 like that, and you can kind of give a preview. I know that's probably going to feel a little bit weird for you to tap 3 for the smooth mesh preview and 1 to go back to the base cage right now at this point, because you probably don't have the best understanding of exactly what that is, but it is just a way that you can kind of check your models, and as you get a little bit more advanced with your modeling, you'll be able to identify problems that way in the model. So just want to kind of bring it to your attention now. I'm going to hit undo and get back to our cube shape, because I wanted to also show you we can join those together that way, or we can select these. What we were using, if we select this vert and hold down shift and select this vert, if we do shift right click and say merge vertices to center, it's a little bit more obvious what's going on there at this point. Okay, so I'm going to do the back verts too, and I'm going to select this one, hold down shift and select this. So the other way is if you want to merge these things, you can see if we go to edit mesh, there's a merge to center, and that's what we're using, and then there's this merge option box which has got a threshold for it. Now if it's on this always merge for 2 vertices, it'll merge those 2 together because we only have 2 selected. If that's off and we hit apply, nothing's going to happen because we've got this threshold, and it's a really low number, and so it's basically looking for any verts that sit directly over the top of each other. And if I really want to make sure it only merges vertices that are sitting over the top of each other, I could do 0.001, a really low threshold like that. So in instances like that, if I hold on V and then snap over like this, these are still 2 vertices like that, but since I snap them together, they're sitting directly over the top of each other. So if I select them and hit apply, I could merge this together like that. Where this becomes handy is if you know you've got a bunch of verts that you want to weld together, and you put a really low threshold like that, you could just select through the entire model and select all the vertices and hit apply, and it's only going to merge vertices together for the ones that are sitting directly on top of each other. So I can take this vert and I can hold down V and do a vert snap, and I can move along this axis and then select through here, and that'll snap that right in through there. And if this got pushed back in any kind of way, I can hold down V and then move it here and snap it to this right through here. So you'll see as we do operations in Maya, there's a lot of different ways to do things. There's a lot of ways to get to merging. I'll show you one last thing for merging verts. And that is if we select this right here, it exists in the modeling toolkit, and we can do this target weld. If we do target weld, you can click and drag a vert over the top of another one, and that'll merge those together like that. Also, if we have a vert selected, and if we hold down Shift, right click over it, under this merge vertices, we've got the merge to center, we've got this merge vertices with the option box that gives us the threshold, and we also have target weld that sits here. So that gives you a lot of options to kind of manipulate and merge the vertices there. So I'm just going to hold down V. I'm going to snap over this way and then check it. And so now we're good to go with this. Let's select our edges and do a bevel on this one too. So if we're in object mode, if we hit F10, it'll put us in this mode where we can select our edges, or we can right click on here and say edge. However you want to do it. I'm going to drag through the entire model. Just drag a marquee over the entire thing, and then I'm going to shift right click and do bevel edge and just do the bevel again. And again, our fraction, I think we did 0.75 or 0.075, sorry. And then our segments, remember we bumped that up to 4, so we've got the way to evenly split these things off on here. And after that, let's take a look in the channel box. We've got a bunch of history. Remember, hotkey for that, Alt-Shift-D. You can get used to that. Edit, delete by type, and you can always find it there. History, and then we've got that. And so we've created our next shape. Now, since we've got this directory structure over here, we could call this try shape, something like that. And then we'll just go ahead and middle mouse drag this into the primitives area right there. And then now that's sitting in the same area, everything's zeroed out, we've got our nice model, and we're good to go. And then we'll start working on the next shape. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit Control S, and that will do it for this shape, other than let's assign that material to it. So select it, right click, assign existing material, and then we can do the M blend, and now we've got our blend material on this shape here. Okay, let's go ahead and create a pyramid shape. So I'm going to go ahead and hide this, select it, hit Control H to hide, and then we're going to go to the create option for a cube, but this time let's use the shelf and just click on the shelf, and it's going to remember the settings that we had last time we created this. So I'm going to hit W for the move manipulator here. Remember, we can hold on X and then just click and drag up on that particular manipulator right here. That'll snap us. We can tap D, hold down V, and that'll snap right there. Actually, we have to hold on X. Sorry, V is vert snap. So we've got this right in the middle, and then we can tap D, and then we can go to Modify Freeze Transformations, and we're going to delete the history, Alt-Shift-D, or we can go to Edit and delete by type, history, like that. And then what I want to do is merge all these vertices together right into the center. Now if you've got a face, you can hold down Shift and right click and say, same area that we were at before, merge faces to center, like that. Or we can go to Edit Mesh and merge to center right here like this. So that's going to give us this new pyramid type shape that we have here. If we hit F10 for all of our edges, or remember you can right click on here and say edge, select everything, and we're going to do the bevel. So again, that is under Edit Mesh, and we can do the bevel, we can do the option box there, or we can shift right click and say bevel and do the option box there. So either one you want to do. I'm going to go ahead and hit apply. I'm going to go change the options for this. And what I could do is if I start to notice that I want to keep these same options on here, I'm going to hit undo real quick. Let's go and do shift right click bevel edge with the option box. If we know that we're going to do 0.075 for this and do segments, and we do 4, we can hit apply, and you can see now every time we do that bevel, it's going to hold those options on there for us. Okay, so we need to delete history. Again, we can select this, Alt-Shift-D. That's the hotkey. Get used to that. Delete the history on there, and we can just right-click over the model and say Assign Existing Material, and we'll do the M-Blend like this. Now we're going to call this Pyramid, like this, and we'll middle mouse drag it into the primitives folder, and we've been able to generate that shape pretty darn quick on there. Alright, let's go ahead and move on to the cylinder shape. So let's go ahead and take the pyramid and we'll hide it. So if you remember, Control H will hide that for us. We're going to go to Create Polygon Primitives, and I'm just going to rip this off real quick just so we can take a look at this. Just want to draw this to your attention that there are primitives for spheres, cubes, cylinders, cones, this torus, plane, disc. So you can see there's quite a bit. We just did a pyramid shape, and they do have a primitive type for this. If any of the primitives, if we select it and we go to the options for this thing, we should be able to control like this, the side lengths. You can see here the number of sides they have. So this has got 3, 4, and then they let you do a pentagon kind of shape too with 5 on there. They'll allow you also to do a subdivision in the heights like this, and also let's see if we can over crank this a little bit higher like this. So if I wanted to, we could take this and move this up by 50, and that's not quite working out exactly the way that I would anticipate for this. So I thought this was just a little bit harder to use. So that's kind of why I took the cube and created that. But I just wanted to draw it to your attention that they do have a primitive type for that. And let's go, now we're going to take a look at the cylinder, and we'll go ahead and do the same thing for this one. So normally whenever I first start using these tools, I don't really know exactly what the options for this is going to give. So this radius, if it's 1, it's going to be pretty small and a height of 2. So we could do a radius, let's just do 50 and a height of 100 like that. And axis division, let's do 16 like this and hit apply. And so now we'll move this up 50 like this, and I think we've got the scale correct. So if I bring back our cube, if I hit Shift H on the cube, yeah, so we're directly within the bounds of what we're looking for here. So I'm going to hit Control H for that. So the thing I wanted to talk to you about for these divisions that we just did for division of 16, if we went to 4, I'm basically trying to get this into quadrants. So here's 1/4, another fourth, another fourth, and that'll equal a whole there, right? Now if we do 8, you can see this is something that you would use in modeling quite a bit, right? So if I took this edge here and I deleted them out, and if I tap 3 for the smooth mesh preview, you can see how that's going to give me quads here and here and here. So that's a pattern to kind of remember here. And so the next step up would be doubling that, and if we go from 8 to 16, and then the next one would be 32. So that just gives us nice even divisions to keep everything into these quadrants that you see here for like a left, right, and bottom left and right, whatever you want to consider for your quadrants that you have there. So I'm going to put this back down to, let's see, 16 I think will be pretty good. And then from there, we don't have to have subdivisions in the cap. So if we put it on 0, we've got no divisions on there. If we do 1, you can see what it does for us there at that point. So let's go ahead and leave it like that. And then this time we're going to go hit F10 for our edges, or right click and say edge. And now we can double click on this. And it's going to give us this loop going around. We'll probably talk about this a little bit more in depth later about loops and things like that as we get further into topology. But for right now, if you've got these divisions on here, it should allow you to hold down Shift, and I can double click on this edge and it'll select the whole loop for me here. So now we're going to go to Bevel, And if you remember for beveling, we can go to edit mesh, we can do the bevel thing here, or we can shift right click and do the bevel edge. And if we've set up our options and kept them, we should be able to just apply that like this here. Now what I'm going to do is tap 3 for the smooth mesh preview, and then we can take our object and hit F8, object mode, or you can right click on here and say object mode. And then let's right click and say assign existing material, and we'll do the blend. And you can see we've got a nice shape going on here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select what we were talking about, every one of these edges, every other edge, like this, and hit delete. Oops, I picked the wrong one there. Let's see here. So I need this, like that, and that one. We'll get rid of that. And that will give us this as an option for the smooth mesh preview. It looks like this when we tap 1. Here's our base cage. But we go here. Let's just get rid of these edges. And sometimes I'll tap 4 to just show in a wireframe. Because sometimes when I'm selecting, I accidentally select like something in the backside like that. And that can be problematic. So I'll just tap 3 and tap 5 for the shaded view. And then let's delete history, Alt-Shift-D, delete history. And then now we've got a polycylinder. I better clean up the names on this. I'll middle mouse drag this in. You can see I got a pyramid, _01, and this tri-shape, 01 like that. And we don't necessarily need the P on the front. They put that for polygon. But we can get rid of that like that and just clean up the names and then close that down. So there you go. We've got another shape created and ready to go. Okay, the next shape that we're going to make is a cone. Again, if we go to create polygon primitives right here, and we'll rip this off, they do have a cone primitive type. And so let's take a look at this, what they've got for this. So radius, if we did 50 and then a height of 100, axis divisions of 16. Let's hit apply for that, and let's see if this is going to give us the right options. So we'll tap W for our move tool, hold down X, and then drag up, and then snap, and that should put us at 50. And you can see it's the same height and everything that we've got for the cylinder. Now it looks a little weird at the very bottom because we rounded out the corners, so this doesn't go all the way straight down for that. So let's select the cylinder, I'll hide it, and we'll do Control H for that. And then we've got our cone, and let's see if they've got options for subdivisions cap. I think, yeah, this is this down here, like this. So we could just do a division of 1, and if you remember what that's going to allow us to do is if we tap 10, F10, or we right click and say our edge, we can double click on this, and then we can shift, right click, do our bevel edge, and we've got our creation options. Now if we tap 3 for this, we do have a little bit of an issue where the top of this kind of falls down on us. So if we tap 1 like this, this is what we could do. This is the problem with history. We'll try this. I think it's going to cause a problem, but if we do subdivisions through the height, and we'll click that and move through it, it's actually doing it, but you can see it's kind of flattening out the bottom of this. So I'm going to hit undo till we get back to the point before we did that. History is pretty cool when it works. Maya is pretty particular about its order, so you can see why we had to hit undo to get back to where we're at here. Now if we did the subdivisions and did the height, and we did let's just say 8 divisions going through here, we've got that. If we tap 3, you can see it's going to hold the top part of this a bit better, so we'll tap 1 for that. Now let's double click this to give us the ring, and then shift right click, do bevel edge, and looks like we are good to go for that. I'll hit undo real quick. I'm going to delete the history, Alt-Shift-D. Before I do that that bevel, just to make sure everything's the right size, what I'm looking for. Okay, so I'll tap F8 to go into object mode, tap 3 for the smooth mesh preview, and then remember I don't want these edges here. I'll hit F10, we'll get rid of this like that, and I did it again, so there we go. There we go, and let's just go right click over it and assign existing material and do the blend. And so we've got a nice cone shape, and we'll go ahead and rename this _1, and we'll middle mouse drag it into the primitives folder. And so we've got another one created, and I'll go ahead and hit Control S just to save the file and make sure that I'm saving. Next primitive type that we're going to make is a sphere. So let's go ahead and take our cone and let's go ahead and hide that. Control H like that, and we'll go to create polygon primitives, and then there's a sphere. Let's do the option box for this. So we'll do a radius of 50, axis divisions, let's just do this 32 by 32. I'm going to reset this just to see what the default for this is. So let's do radius of 50, and then I'll do 32 divisions by 32 divisions and hit apply, and that'll give us a nice sphere. And if we tap F8 to cycle back and forth between object and component mode, and we tap W for the move tool, if we hold down X, we can move up and then snap, and it should be just moving up 50 increments there. So we can select the object, right click and say assign existing material and do M blend, and then we've got this. So that's pretty simple. I did want to show you an option for taking a cube and turning that into a sphere. It's actually a pretty important modeling concept that will probably make a whole lot more sense later. So I'm just going to create the cube, and then you've been seeing we can tap 3 for the smooth mesh preview, but what happens is if you have a cube and it doesn't have any divisions on it, if we tap 3 for the smooth mesh preview, it actually takes that cube and it rounds it and it adds divisions to it and it starts to smooth it. So it takes the cube and turns it into a sphere. What is kind of cool about this is it still really is a cube. It's just got these parts are kind of bulged out right here like this. So it still has its 6 sides. If you see this type of geometry, this is called a pole. It's got a north pole and a south pole. And you can see everything kind of runs into these poles, and that can cause some pinching in here. So this method of making a sphere like this can sometimes be a better option, and it can maybe give you a little less polys to actually make the sphere. Now, in order to keep this as a shape, they've got under modify, they've got an area where you convert things. So you can convert this smooth mesh preview to polygons. And you can see as soon as you do that, it gives you this polygon smooth face, and it's got 2 divisions right now. If you went up to like 3, you can see it takes every quad that you have and it divides it into 4. So if you see those, if I go the next one up, it keeps dividing. If we go to division 0, that's our base cage. Here's 1 and 2 and 3. And I'll just put it at 4 like this. There's only one kind of issue going on with this thing, and let me show you. If I push this here, put it on 50, and then we'll scale it up a little bit. This sphere is not a perfect sphere. So if I make this just a little bit larger than the other sphere, what I can do is this. I can transfer the shape of the good sphere onto this newer topology that we're making. And let me scale this up just a little bit bigger like this. So if we select the sphere and then hold on Control and then select the what is considered the polycube right there, we're going to go to Mesh and then Transfer Attributes and go to the option box for this. And so we're going to put this on vertex position on and then everything else off. And we'll set the sample space and world because these 2 objects are sitting directly over the top of each other. If it was something other than that, we might use some of these other methods, but we'll just use world. So we'll hit apply, and what should happen is this model is now going to kind of like imagine it shrink wrapping down onto the model down below it. So that's kind of what's going on. Now we've got this transfer attributes on there, we've got polysmooth, we've got scale. So here's a good case for us to delete history. Alt-Shift-D will delete history. And then we've got some translation data and some scale. So we'll go to modify freeze transformations. So we'll set that all up. And then we need to move our pivot point. So we'll tap D and hold down X and then move this down and then vert snap right there. We'll tap X, tap D again to release, and we should be good to go for that. So we can get rid of the old sphere as long as we've deleted history. Now if we would get rid of the old sphere, if it still had that transfer attributes information on there, that could be problematic because it's still looking for that information. So now that we deleted history, we can get rid of this. We'll just delete it, and we'll call this we'll just call this sphere, and maybe from cube, something like that, just to let us remember that. So I'll middle mouse drag this up into the primitives area, and then let's assign, we'll just select the object, right click, assign existing material, do the blend, and so we're good to go. We've got another shape, and that's all wrapped up. This next shape that we're going to make is a pill shape. This one's going to be a little bit more difficult to make because we're going to make some different objects and then combine them together. So let's take the sphere, we'll hide it, select it, hit Control H to hide that, and then we're going to go ahead and say create polygon primitives, and let's tear this off because we're going to use it quite a bit. Let's make a sphere, and let's take a look at the option box for this. I'm going to do a radius of 25, an axis division of 16 by 16, and hit apply. So that's going to give us this sphere that you see here like this, and I'm going to move it up. I'm going to hold down X and move it up right here like this, and I want this to sit right on the bottom. So I need to put in 25 for this, like this right here. Okay, so I'm going to hit Control D, and I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to move it up right here like this. And if I go to my side view, let's tap the space bar and look to the side. So let's tap space bar over either the side or the front, either one. And then now let's push this thing down and get it close to where it needs to be. And then if I'm not sure the exact number to use, I usually just kind of get it in the ballpark, and then I can go over to the channel box, and then I can start making that number exactly what it needs to be. So this is 75. Okay, so I'm going to make a top part of this and a bottom part of this. Let's hit the space bar over the top of this, hit space bar on the perspective view, and then now I'm going to hit F11, and I'm going to delete the top half of this. So I need to go kind of rotate my camera to where I can easily select this much of it. I just tap 4 to do the wireframe view, so I can do that and get rid of the top half of this one, and I can drag through on this one and then hit delete and delete the bottom part of this. Okay, so the next thing we're going to create is a cylinder. So let's do the cylinder, and then this one let's do a radius of 25 and a height of I'm going to try 50 and see what that is. We got a axis division of 16. And if we did everything right and we were able to move this thing up into position, we'll move it up 50. That should give us the right amount of geometry to kind of line up. Now if we want to see wireframe on shaded, this is a good mode to take a look at geometry. You can turn this on right here in the interface, and you can see everything's lining up perfectly for us. So that's one of the cool things with these primitives and using specific numbers like this. You can get your geometry to match up pretty easily. So I'm going to tap 4. I don't need the tops of this, so if we went into the creation options, subdivisions on the cap, if we put that to 0, that gets rid of all that geo there. But we don't need the faces on the top and the bottom because we're going to join this shape together with this and this. So to go to faces, we hit F11, or you can right click and say face right here. So we're going to select the top face, delete that. Select the bottom face, delete that. And I could delete history. Alt-Shift-D. I'll delete history on this, and this. And then I'm going to take all my pieces like this, and I'm going to combine them together. So we're going to go to Mesh, Combine. And that takes multiple objects. You can see over there in the outliner, right over here. We've got 3 different objects, and when we do combine, it's going to combine them together. It's going to leave this transform group in here. This is where you definitely want to delete history because this could screw some stuff up. So we're going to delete history. Alt-Shift-D will delete history, and you should see all those folders go away. So this is a new object of ours, and if we tap 3 for Smooth Mesh Preview, everything looks pretty good. If we turn off the wireframe on shaded, you can still see there's some hard edging through here, and especially if we select our object and then right click and say assign existing material and blend, if we roll this around, you can definitely tell that there's some kind of issue with the model. So that's another reason why this material is good versus the blend. This helps you see any kind of problems you might have. So I already know if I select my verts for this F9 and select one of these verts, and if I pulled it away, this is not merged together right now, right? So we could go through and select each one of these verts. We've already looked at if we shift right click, we can go to merge vertices and say merge vertices to center. And if I tap G for my last command, I can keep doing that last command that I did. So right now I'm merging those verts together. But since we are like watertight with this model and all these verts sit directly over the top of each other, remember there's another option for us that will make our life easier. So we'll just select all the vertices, shift right click, go to merge vertices, and then we'll do the merge vertices with the option box with this threshold. And I like to put that threshold really low, so if we do 0.001, that should be pretty low. We'll hit apply, and it should just merge vertices for anything that's sitting directly on top of each other. So if we tap 3, we can see what this thing looks like in the Smooth Mesh Preview mode. Now we don't have that line that was there. So I'll delete history, Alt-Shift-D. If I tap 1 to go back, the shading problem is still there. And that's because we're not going to get into normal information right now, but that's what's going on. We need to soften our edges or the normals on this edge and through here. So we can do this. We can go to Mesh Display, and we can go to Soften Edges or Harden Edges. If we do Harden Edges, you can see what it's going to do for us, and it hardens all the edges and makes everything look faceted. Or we can go to Mesh Display and say Soften Edge, and then it softens everything up. And then now if we tap 3, we've got a really nice model for both the base cage and the Smooth Mesh Preview. Okay, so now I'm going to just call this pill shape and do _101. And then middle mouse drag this into primitives, close this up, and I'm going to go ahead and save the file. And then we're ready for our very last shape. Okay, now we're ready for our very last shape, and we're going to go make a torus. And you can see, we can see it here on the shelf, or we can go to create polygon primitives, and we can go find the torus right here. So I'm just going to go ahead and click it and create it. Looks pretty small. If we take a look at the options for this radius, this is why. If we put this at 50, then we're getting a size kind of what we're used to. Now we got this section radius, and if we middle mouse on this, I think I'd want something probably at least about 15 for this section radius. I think that looks pretty good like that. And then now we've got the subdivision axis this way. So I'm going to make this 32 divisions, and then subdivision axis this direction, we can go all the way down to 3. If we do 4, we get a shape like this. The interesting thing is they do have a twist, so if you twisted this thing out at the right angle, might take a second to kind of figure that out. I don't know if that's 45 degrees like this. You could turn this into a pipe. Now they do have a pipe primitive, but this is a way that you could do that. I'm just going to put this twist back down to 0. And then the subdivision height, remember, we're going to use 4 or we'll use 8. And if we, because we're still following that method that I was talking to you about, we've got a quadrant here, 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 and then here. So that even works going around in this direction. But we'll go ahead and make this 16. So that gives us a nice amount of divisions. So I'm going to right click on there, assign the blend to it. And then we'll go ahead and take this and we'll put on the rotate tool, which is E, or you can come over here and do the rotate tool. Now they do have a hotkey for this. If you hold down J, you can click and then drag, and it'll snap to, looks like 15-degree increments. So I want this at 90, like this. And then now I'm going to move this up. And I need to move it up, let's see, 50. And let's see what we've got here as far as our cube. So I think I've made this a little bit too big. So I can come back through here and we will take the radius and drop that down to, let's see, where does it need to be? 35. Okay. I'm going to take this cube, hide it, Control H, like this. We'll take the pill shape and hide it. So now we should be pretty good. It depends on if you want this a little bit smaller. You can put this at 10 for this section radius. That's the interesting thing, that that number works in conjunction with the radius to give the actual shape of this. And I wasn't quite aware of that. So if I do this at 40, we can do 40 plus this 10 will give you the 50 is what I believe is what's going on. So those two numbers together actually matter. So if I wanted this, if I did want this larger, like 15, then I need this at 35, like that. But I thought that was a little bit thick, so I'd rather have it 40 and 10, like this. And then we could do the tap 3 for the smooth mesh preview for this. And so we've got the name is already on there for a Torus, and we'll do _01, and we'll middle mouse drag this into the primitives area, delete the history on it, save our file, and congratulations, we've just made all the primitive shapes that we need. And I'm going to show you in just a second how we can keep everything at the origin, like where we have it currently, and then we can spread these parts out as well. And we're also going to make an infinity wall to finish up this part for this video. Okay, let's talk about how we can basically add keyframes for where these objects sit. And so then we've got, if we bring everything back, select it, Shift H, we'll have all their initial positions saved, and then we'll make it to where when we go to do the render layout, we've got a layout for that works. That way later on when we go to push these shapes into UE4, you want everything right on the center of the world for the grid. So this is the position that we want for export. And so what we're going to do is go to the time slider. It should be already set to 1 there. And I'm going to go select this translate X, and we're going to key everything all the way down. We'll even key the scale. So I'll hold on Shift, select here, and I'm going to right click and say key selected. So that's going to key all those different channels that we have here. Then I'm going to move it along the time slider. We can just move it to like 60 or something like that. So you can see this end here gives where it sits at the very beginning. And if you want it to go into the negative range, you could do a -100, and then you can see how that's starting to open that up within there. We're just going to leave this at 1. Actually, we'll do 0, and we'll leave it at 1 like that. So it starts at 1, frame 1, and we'll put this one to, let's just do 90 frames, and I'll put this at 100. So you can see this range that we're seeing goes to 90, but if we click and move this thing around, we can do that. So we've got a keyframe already at 1. and let's just do 1 and 1 here, like that. And let's just move it to like 60 seconds, like this. And then let's take the cube and we'll move it over, tap W, and we'll push this over about here. We can hold down X and grid snap if we want. So this one's at 250, and then we can do this one here. Let's leave the cylinder right in the middle like that, and then we'll take this pyramid and we'll push it over like this, and I'm holding down X. So we'll give ourselves just 10 units in between each one of these, like that. Okay, so we got our cylinder, now we got our cone. We'll tap X, like that, and our sphere. We'll move that over one more, like this. And then let's do the pill shape. Hold down X. Move that over. Let's see if we got this over one more. Like that. See, I think I need to be over like one more. Just kind of nitpicking on this. And I'll take the torus and hold down X and then move that over here like this. So I think that looks pretty good. So I'll select everything. I'm just going to select the top one, hold down Shift and select. And we're already in frame 60. And let's just select this again, hold down Shift. You can right click and say key selected. And the cool thing is this is actually animating. I guess I forgot to give a key for this one here. So let's put this at 0. Remember we said we could 0 all that stuff out, except for I think I know what happened here in this one. Okay, so we've got this. I think I'm gonna take the time to fix this one. Let's go ahead and hide these real quick. So it appears to me like I forgot to freeze the transformations on this. So I don't want any keyframe data on here. I'm going to get rid of this. So I'm going to select here, holding down Shift to there, then right click, and then we'll say break connections, and that will get rid of all the keyframe data on there. So I'm going to go modify freeze transformations. Sorry that I missed that step. Probably a little too anxious to get that done. Tap D. Hold down X, push this down, tap D again, and then that's our new pivot point. Okay, so now if I go to frame 1, let's key all this. I'll bring everything back. So I'll do Shift H to bring back the visibility, and let's do the time slider, slide everything out. Now the torus should still be sitting there in the middle. I'll tap W for the move tool, hold down X, and then push right over here, and then I'm going to key selected for that, and then now we got keyframe data on that. Okay, so that gets us everything that we need for the setup for taking our shapes and getting them to where we can export them from the center origin of the world, and then also store this alternate position for them. Alright, now that we have all of our pieces made, let's go ahead and build our infinity wall. Our infinity wall is basically going to be a flat piece that has a nice curvature to it and then goes back into a flat piece that goes up in the air. And they use this in photography to do a product shot. So basically you can put any kind of piece against this infinity wall and you never get a harsh horizon line. You get a nice fall off and a gradient back there. Normally this would just be like one wall piece that extrudes up. But since we're doing things in CG, we can cheat a little bit, and so we can do this from all sides. And I'll go ahead and show you how to set that up. So what we're going to do, we're going to go create polygon primitives, and we're going to do a plane. And let's do the option box for this. And if you remember when we set up our grid, we pushed out 400 units. So we're going to make the width 400 by 400, and then do a width divisions of 10 by 10. And go ahead and hit apply. That'll put this right directly in the center, and you might be wondering, well, why is this not going to the full extent of the grid? What they were saying by this 400 by 400 is this. The grid's going to push out this direction, this direction, this direction, this direction, and it's going to do so with that many units. Now we can take the divisions. Let's see if we go a little bit lower with this. Let's see, accidentally tap. I'm going to tap 5 on here. And so if we do 4 by 4, then we're matching something like what we have with the grid. So I'm going to put this all back to 0 like this. And what we can do is if we scale this thing up, we're going to go scale it up 2 times, and then we need our divisions to be 8 by 8 like that. And then now we've matched everything that we have with the grid under here. That's not super important, but it's just a nice starting point. So I'll go ahead and scale this up even further past this, like this. So let's just do 2.67, something like that. And this is not super important. It's just trying to get some value within there, like that. So I'm going to hit 10, F10, and then select my edges like this and double click. If I double click all the way around, it'll go all the way around the entire perimeter of the object. And so now I'm going to shift right click and say extrude face. And so we're going to do a thickness, and we'll go up 100 units, and then we'll do an offset of 50. Let's do 50. And let's tap G again for that tool, and let's go ahead and do another thickness of 100 like that. Actually, this time when we move up, I'm just going to tap W and put it in the move tool, and just push. That'll allow us to push just straight up whenever we go and do this. So I might have to take a look over here in the channel box. If I hit undo, I need to get back to this thing here. So it looks like we've got just this one extrude here, and I'm going to select it. I'm trying to get back to the settings for that. So it's kind of weird that it didn't select it for us, but selected the object, selected this in the channel box, and then you can hit this little icon here, which will bring the manipulator back. And basically we can use the thickness stuff again, but it's doing a weird kind of thing with the geometry. We've got some oddness going on with the offset. So this manipulator will push, and it's considered like object space. Now if we click this will move us over to moving in world space. So now we can just click and then drag straight up. And you can see the numbers over here. We can numerically type that in. Maybe I go 200 with that, or maybe try 150, something like that. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit F10 again, double click this, and shift right click, extrude edge. And let's see if we can do this one more time and then push up. So let's go 200 with this, like this. So now we're going to tap 3 for smooth mesh preview on it, and I think we're starting to get what I was hoping for here. Nice straight to curvature, and then this kind of moves out like this. Now if I wanted this to be larger and move out further, we could do this. We could hit F10, grab our edges here, and if you grow a selection, that is if you hold down shift, and that's there's a left and right arrow key that basically sit on the period and the comma key. So if we hit shift period key, so it looks like a little arrow, we can grow this selection out, and I'm going to hit it one more time, shift and that arrow key, and that grows it out. Now if we tap R for scale, let's scale this out a little bit more like this. Let's do this all over again. This time we're going to double click on the outer perimeter and then shift and the period key or that little arrow key and grow it out once. And let's just grow this out just a little bit to build this kind of curvature. And then we'll tap 3 and then see what we've got. So we've got a bigger, what I've just done is just increase the area for this ramp up here that you see here. So we've built some nice curvature like that, and then now to make sure that we don't see the top of this, so if we're inside of this and it's basically a bowl and you want to get some like really close-up shots, you don't want to see the top of it. So let's go ahead and hit F10, and let's go ahead and shift right click, extrude edge, and then we'll just click on this manipulator here and then drag straight up, and we'll type in like 400 for this, like that. So I'm going to select this, I'm going to call it infinity wall. Like that. We'll go ahead and just throw it into the geometry area, so that'll sit outside the primitives and be a little bit different. Delete history, Alt-Shift-D will delete the history on it. And right now I don't want to see the back side of this, so if we go to shading, we can do turn on backface culling like this, and so then that way we will not see the back side of this. It's only going to draw one side of it, so that's why it looks like it's transparent, but it works pretty good as a technique. I can turn off the grid now and just kind of evaluate everything that's going on. We've got this shading that is going on because of we've turned on that screen space ambient occlusion like we talked about at the very beginning, and so now we've got a pretty decent setup here. Sometimes if I save this file and I come back, I'll come back and it'll look like this because the smooth mesh preview isn't turned on for this. So let's do a few more things. Let's go to mesh display and go soften edge, and we'll soften all of our edges. So it kind of looks like this at the very beginning. Alt-Shift-D, I'm just going to keep deleting history. I did scale this thing up a little bit. Let's go to modify, freeze transformations on there. So we froze the transformations on there. And let's turn off this ambient occlusion. I just want to check and make sure everything's good with the normals. So we're getting a lot of darkness in the corners because of the ambient occlusion thing. That's fine. So if I tap 3 for this, we've got this infinity wall, and we want to convert this over because, like I was saying, sometimes I come back in the program and it looks like this. So I'd rather have it actually have the geometry. So let me show you a little trick with this convert over from smooth mesh preview. So we can go to modify, convert smooth mesh preview to polygons, and we can do that. It puts a node on here, and normally we delete history, but we can leave the history on here. So if we ever need to get back to the base cage, we can tap 0 on here on this divisions. So you just select the object, you'd go to poly smooth face, and you could up the divisions to 1. The default is 2 for that. If you needed even more, you could tap 3 or 4. I'll just go ahead and leave it on 2. So now that we have that node on this object, every time we come into the program, it'll have that resolution set for it, like that. Okay. Something else that I would like to do for this scene to get everything nice and wrapped up and kind of clean. I was telling you that I like to have groups for everything. We can do this with our cameras too. So let's select this camera, hold down shift and select it, and you can hit Control G, and if you remember, that's under here. We can do edit group, and I'm going to name this cameras like this, and then I'm going to take my infinity wall and select it, and I'm going to show you something with layers real quick. So over here we've got display, and we got layers. Let's go ahead and click this icon here, which creates a new layer and assign selected object. So we'll go ahead and click that, and I'm going to call this, I'm going to double click on it and just call this infinity wall underscore layer, and I'm going to the end of it. And I always keep layer on there. Maya doesn't like you to have the same name for things, so we've already got an infinity wall, so I wouldn't just call that. I usually put anything I make layers, I put underscore layer at the end of it. That makes it really easy for us to turn on and off the pieces. If we wanted to open this up and then select our primitives folder like this, or our group, we could do another layer for this and double click on it, okay, and call it primitives underscore layer, like that. Save that, and then now that makes it really easy for us to turn the visibility on and off for that. Now what I like to do with the infinity wall is if you click this once, it puts it into, it says T, and that means it's in template mode. It does a see-through thing. You can't select it. Now if you put on R, it's reference. So the visibility of it you can see, but you can't accidentally select it. And that comes in kind of handy, especially if you've got a lot of stuff and you just want that infinity wall in the back and you don't want to touch it. We've got our visibility, and if you click off this again, it's basically got three modes. Normal mode, where you can select it, template, and then reference, so you can actually select it. You can see it that way. Okay, so I'll get that set up like that. Last thing I want to do, I want to start to build lighting, and we can make an empty group. We can just not have anything selected and hit Control G, and that'll make they call it a null. It's an empty group basically. Same thing if we went up here to edit and then group and you don't have anything selected, it's going to make a null for you as well. And I can call this lights, like this. And now at this point, I like to have the cameras at the very top, and then so if I take Geo, if I middle mouse drag that in between these two, I can rearrange this. And I usually like to have camera, then lights, and then Geo. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a spotlight for us. And so if we go to create and go to lights, we can create a spotlight. And let's just do the option box for this. Let's tell it to cast shadows. We'll do a cone angle of 40 is good, penumbral angle of 20, like this, and we'll hit apply. And so we'll take this spotlight and we'll drag it, middle mouse drag it into the scene. That means we're starting to look through the light as like a camera, and so I'll just zoom out and I'll kind of get this lined up. Now this is going to look kind of funky because of a thing called clipping planes. If we hit Control A to bring up our attribute editor, I was telling you about the attribute editor. Control A is the hotkey for it. You can go to Windows and General Editors, Attribute Editors, where that thing sits. But whenever you pull it into the scene like this, if you select it, you can go to Panels and you can say Look Through Selected. That's basically what we did by middle mouse dragging it into the viewport. You're going to have this thing as a camera shape. And then you've got a near clipping plane, which if you change that to 1, and then this far clipping plane, if you add another 0 to it, it pushes out further in the scene with depth. This has been a thing that I have to set constantly since I became a Maya user at the very beginning. I would love to see them make this a non-issue, but it is, so I just kind of get used to it. So if you see any weird black sizzling shading along the object, you need to increase the near clip plane, and if you can't see all the way through your camera and it's cutting it off, then you need to increase the depth of the far clip plane. Okay, so we've got this set up, and if I hit Control A for this, or we take a look at the channel box over here, this is the cone angle, is the inner part of this. So if I tap 7 to see lighting, it's going to have full light within here, and then the penumbra angle that you see, let's see, the spotlight shape is 20. So this is the fall off, so it goes from pure light to soft fall off, and it should be nothing after that. So if we go panels perspective and then go back to perspective, we can see the shadow only whenever we turn this on. So we have to go to lighting and then go to shadows, and then we turn that on. Now it's going to look horrible as soon as we turn it on. If we have the light selected, we can go to this shadows area right here, and then we're using a depth map shadow, so it's a map based way of generating a shadow, and so we're seeing the resolution of that, and it's not very high. So right now it's 512. We can pump that up to 1024, and it gets a little better. We can do 2048. That gets a lot better. This filter size, if we drag that over to the right, we can get a little bit of softening in there. Now you're not going to really be able to tell that. I wish we could pump that up even higher. That'd be really cool if we could go even higher and get a better effect, but it doesn't really work that way. So I'll go to 1024 and we'll drop the map down, and let's see, if I go back to 5, then we get that, it's a little bit softer. Now if we go back to that 512, it is softer, and I like the softness of the shadows, but you can see it's still a little bit chunky for the resolution. So maybe 1024 is like the medium ground here. Now you can control the color of your shadow. You could actually pick a color if you wanted to do that on there. Surprised it's not actually doing anything for the color. But you could actually make this a little bit lighter. And I don't know if it was just not catching up because I didn't move the camera. Yeah, that's an odd, that feels like a bug to me. But we had to shake the camera in order for that to show up. But normally you just drag this here. If you want it to be a little bit lighter, you can drag this over. So this is just what I would consider just some real-time lighting. Now it's going to be pure black on the back side of this. So to simulate some bounce light, we can go to create lights and go to point light and add that. And if we drag this thing down this way and maybe come over here, let's take a look. It's got no decay right now, and if I put this on quadratic, then it gives a fall off, but it's a really quick fall off for the light. If we have it on a no decay, it just goes on for infinity. So let's do the intensity, and I'm going to do something really high, like 5,000. So you can see now this is kind of maybe the fall off that I would get from something like this. I'm going to make sure it's not using shadows. So if you saw that, this is another thing that I think is kind of a bug. It didn't have shadow information turned on. But if we click it to turn it to where it has shadow information on and then turn that off, then it doesn't produce any shadows, and you can see it moves through the floor basically. And that's what I want. I want it to kick up some light. Let's turn off the no decay, and then now let's see if we take this intensity and do like 0.5. I'm going to do 0.2. I'm just trying to get just a little bit of light on the back side of this thing, on all the objects, just so we're not in pure black at that point. Maybe push it off to the side a little. So the other thing is we can turn off emit specular, and so we could only make it push out diffuse light. So I think that usually looks a little bit better for bounce. So 0.5, and let's do 0.4. Sometimes you just got to keep playing around with these values until you're kind of happy with it. 0.25. So I think that looks pretty good. And again, what I'm considering this as is this is just real-time lighting. We're going to get into a little bit later about rendering lighting and things like that with Arnold. So this is just some lighting we're doing for preview within here. So I'm just still not exactly happy with the values on here, so still trying to see something. So I'll just go ahead and I'll leave it at that. I did notice with our infinity wall, you see how this shadow's curving up? I don't really want that. So I'd like to scale this up a little bit more to where this is just completely flat there. So maybe I'll make this 1.5, and no big deal. That's what we made the infinity wall for. We can scale it up or down however we like this. Okay. And so I'm going to group these lights and call this Control G and call this real time. And I'm going to minimize drag this into my lights folder. And then now I'll have a folder set up for real-time lights and then render lights. Now we could select this and make a new layer for it and double click it and call this real-time lights underscore layer, like that. And now if we turn this on and off, you can see we can easily turn on and off all of our lights like that. Then one last thing I'm going to do for this scene, I'm going to set up a camera to get us going for an aspect ratio for rendering. So if I go to panels, perspective, and do new, I can get a new perspective camera. And I'll leave the perspective camera that's default for working in, and then this one I'll call it perspective underscore render, like this. I'm I'm going to go to the render settings right here and open this up. And we'll take a look at this. We can scroll down a little bit on this common area, and we can tell it what aspect ratio that we want for this. So I'm going to do 1920 by 1080, and we can maintain the width and height ratio for this. And if we did 2560, we should get 1440. So now we can move between different HD resolutions pretty easily. So I'm going to leave it on this. This is the resolution of my monitor. I'll close that up. And then now while I'm in this camera, I can go view, and then camera settings, and then go to resolution gate and turn that on. And you can see, now I can see if I was going to render this image, this is the exact setup that I would be getting for this. So I'm just going to push this here, and then take the time slider, and we're at 60 from before, and that's going to take this perspective render, and then I'm going to go here, hold down shift to the rotate, and then right click and say key selected. And then now you can see our parts move. Our camera is stationary, but if I wanted to go like from here and do a shot like this, I can go to the time slider on 1, and then I could frame this up, and all of our objects fit within this bound to this cube. So now I can go ahead and key this at frame 1, and if we do the animation and pull it out, you should be able to run from this shot all the way to this shot. And if you wanted to render out an animation of those doing this, you would be able to do that. So we are learning just a little tiny bit about animation at that point. We can go ahead and put this at 60, and then you can go ahead and you could play this if you want and kind of see this, right? Okay, so I'll leave it right here, and I'll go ahead and middle mouse drag and put this into my cameras folder. And so if I close everything up, everything's nice and neat in my outliner. My file is really organized. I've got cameras, I've got lights, I've got geometry, so everything is nice and clean. And let's go ahead and save this file, and for this section, let's call this whole thing done. So we've got everything done that we need for our modeling, and then in the next video we're going to be taking a look at how we can set everything up and do a really nice quality render inside of Arnold. Now for presentation's sake, this real-time lighting, this might be, you can call this good enough to get a rough pass on everything. You know, if you're in a hurry and you kind of need to quickly do some of this stuff, this might be good enough for you. But yeah, so we're going to take a look at how to make really nice high quality lighting and rendering using Arnold in the next video.